One of the mantras I use regularly is that structure and restriction builds freedom. So the more that you can create structures, the more that you can restrict exactly what you're doing, you free yourself up. And by the way, you decrease the stress of the rest of the organization because they're not trying to figure it out yourself. One of the things I love about being an entrepreneur is it will bring up the thing that you're bad at, it will emphasize it the most, and it will make you work on it or it won't work.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. And this is a super special episode. When I was selling my book, promoting my book, doing my Boundary Boss book, I had someone on my team who knew someone who was a strategist who'd helped lots of people have best-selling books and all these other things. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. And this guy's name is Camper Bull. That's his name, his actual name. And I was like, all right, well, if nothing else, that's a very cool name. So let's meet. And I actually really respect the person on my team who introduced us. So I was like, okay, if she loves him. And I had such a wonderful experience having Camper on my book launch team. So he worked with me and my team for 6 months and really helped us understand how to launch a successful book. Like, what are the things that you need to do? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Camper, and then I hope you enjoy the interview. He is a recognized and sought after product and marketing strategist. He's teamed up with and produced hundreds of products and programs for JJ Virgin, Robin Sharma, and so many other leaders in the wellness industry for the past 13 years. His expertise is solidly built on how to create passive revenue streams and build ever expanding audiences, which is definitely what he helped me to do. Camper's reputation for building brands is hallmarked by long term, mind blowing success. So I hope you enjoy my interview with my friend Camper Bull as much as I enjoyed yakking with him. I'm super psyched to welcome my friend Camper Bull to the Terri Cole Show. Welcome, Camper.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's a really pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So fun. I thought about it. I would always look to you when I needed help, when I was struggling with something. The intro, I talked a little bit about our backstory and how you very generously and beautifully helped me with the launching of Boundary Boss. But what I learned, maybe the most pivotal things that changed my experience, which I'm going to share right now, maybe for the first time. I don't know if you know this, but I was struggling as a first time author with the notion of asking other people to support my book. I knew I needed to do it in my own, over-functioning mind. I was like thinking about how I did all these things for all these people and they should all just want to do it for me. And I was so stressed and so constricted about it. And you and I had a meeting and you were like, Terri, do you think you wrote a good book? I was like, yeah. You're like, did you write the book you wanted to write? I was like, I did. You're like, do you think that people having this book is going to change their life? And I was like, I'm positive it will. You're like, that's what you are asking people to do, to be a part of this boundary revolution that you are creating. They're not doing you a favor, Tara. Like, can you ask them because you believe so much in your mission? And I was like, oh my God, I was making it all about me, all about my ego, all about all this other stuff. But that really shifted something for me in a really powerful way where I was able to separate myself from the book. So, by the way, thanks.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for that.
It's really interesting that we realize that we don't realize how many people are really thinking about themselves all the time. And a lot of and this is very unusual because I'm not usually on this side of the camera in any way, shape, or form. I'm
I know.
totally more comfortable being on the other side of the camera looking
I
in. So
know.
this is great fun and slightly uncomfortable for me, which is great. But what's really interesting about that is it's like we tie ourselves up into a lot of these things and don't really realize that if you've done something, this is going to help. And I think one of the things that I love about your book is it's so easy to get not only speak to you but also listen to you and get that information. Now, I don't do a lot of reading. I'm dyslexic, so I actually listen. But in many ways, being able to deliver that to more and more people. One of the things I was really impressed with you about is your consistency. And you
Mhm.
just get up and you go do ahead and do it. We had some great conversations about how often you did it, but in many ways, one of the things that really I see makes a successful individual, and certainly you're a perfect example of that, is your absolute consistency. You're continuing to work on a regular basis to really just drive it, even when it's uncomfortable and or not what you wanted to do.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that. Yes, that stick to itness, I do think that's part of being successful. But let's talk a little bit about, because one thing that I find with my personality type, and basically, the next book is about high functioning codependency. And a lot of the qualities that a high functioning codependent has is the sort of the over delivering, the over giving, the overdoing, the in a way being last on your own list because you really need to check these boxes. So let's talk a little bit about burnout, because as I said at the top of the show when I was doing your intro, that you have worked with many, and you're so funny because you don't talk much about the people that you've worked with, but you've worked with many super high profile people who are doing a lot of things in their daily life, and there is a lot expected of them. And what are your top thoughts about avoiding burnout?
So, burnout for me is a really interesting problem for everyone. So, in this week, I was at a board of directors meeting in Portland. I came back. I'm a single parent, so I have my son one day, then I have two meetings to go to, then I've got two new organizations that are being started up, as well as an ability to, just get every daily life going. And we all kind of want to put more and more things into that container. It doesn't matter whether you're a single parent who's just trying to figure out how to get lunch and dinner on the table at the right times, to a dear friend of mine is a global CEO who spends 60% of his time in the air. So a lot of what we worry about burnout is our ability to continue to schedule ourselves. So creating structure around that becomes very important. One of the most important things I do is I schedule days off. I try and schedule about 150 to 160 days off a year. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail, but in many ways, and structuring my time. Lots of us find that we actually do better if we have less time to do something than more. Book writing is one of the classic examples where we can spend a lot of time worrying about it. So my time is compressed that way, and we're given time to be actually able to, but you're also setting up time to really deal with the things as you need it to be. Because a lot of that's mental burnout. A lot of that's just the inability to be creative on a regular basis. Um,
Yes. I want to say something about the days off, though, because when you were working with my team, there are so many things that changed because of your influence and because of your strategies that made the quality of my life so much better. But one of them was insisting. Like, I remember how resistant I was to the days off thing, which is so crazy. Like, when you think about it now, like how a year and a half later, right, we're able to be more productive, make more money, do more things with less stress. And I think that I had that there was an illusion that I had that the busier I was, the more successful I was, or it's almost like the more stressed I was, the more high functioning I was, which of course, obviously, you don't have to be a therapist to know that is not true. But to really allow, it took probably 6 months of having these scheduled days off where I would try to work and my team would be like, "You're not supposed to be on Slack. It's your day off. You're supposed to be going away with Vic. Why are you still checking in? You don't need to." And there's something from an ego point of view. And when you are a high functioning, controlling person, it's really hard to imagine that the ship is going to keep on going without you, but it actually is, and better, because it isn't without you. It's just without you for 48 hours or for 72 hours or for whatever the time period is. So I just wanted to highlight that the strategy that you have of really building in taking time off and structuring it, not as a wish, not as a one day, not as a maybe I won't work on Sunday, but as the way that you taught me and my team to do it was that it was like hard and in the calendar. Like it was actually there, not as a maybe, but as a definite. And I cannot believe how much that changed the quality of my internal experience of feeling like I could take time off and like everything wasn't going to be burned to the ground because I took time off.
And
So thank you.
a lot of what we talk about as entrepreneurs, we get concerned that we've had to do it all the time. And
Mhm.
as most entrepreneurs have started, or anyone has started, they've started small, and as the team grows, you just assume A, you can do it better, and you can do it faster because you've done it before, and B and C, if you haven't done it, if you're not doing it, it's not going to get done. And if you train your team to do that, then you're absolutely right. That's exactly what you're going to get.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you let them do it, it's astounding what actually comes out. All of a sudden, if you allow the people the space to get their own work done, if you allow them to be creative, if you allow them to be excited about what they're doing, life gets A, easier for you, and B, becomes so much better. I gave up so many of the things that I used to do, either because I'm not very good at it, or I recognize that other people are so much better at it. So one of the things I do that I don't own my own schedule. I literally have if I get on the schedule, the team that runs me basically and all the time will come up and say, "You're being rogue. I'm not allowed to touch my own schedule." Um, but a lot of what that all is just to control me, because I want to be in on everything, and I want to make every decision and things like that. And I need someone to help me pull me back and say, "No, you don't need to worry about that right now." Or
Right.
here is exactly what you need to be involved with. And that's a way that they protect me to be creative.
Yep. And
Um,
for you to do the things that only you can do in your company. Right. So part of it when we're kind of micromanaging stuff or wanting to be in on stuff that we don't need to be, we're doing things that other people can do. And fiscally and bandwidth wise and energetically, of course, and intellectually, it makes no sense. But it's learning. I think that those of you, if you're listening and this is resonating with you, that you feel like you got to have your hand in all the things, building the right team in life, if you are an entrepreneur, solopreneur, building an empire, is so incredibly important. And that really took me years. How long did it take you to build the right team?
I've been blessed with a great number of people who've supported me over many years. So my team
Mhm.
has been the person that's been with me the longest, I think, has been with me 14 years.
Mhm.
We really started to hit our stride about 8 to 10 years ago. That has very little to do with anyone but me. I hold full responsibility for taking almost 10 years to figure out how to actually get a good team going. In many ways, it's the need to A, let go, and B, find the people. One of the things we all find we do a lot of, and whether that's you selecting the right babysitter, or you're selecting the person who runs your life, or the person who runs the entire company, is we like to get people who are exactly like us. So at one point I was we started a startup, and we started at $500,000, and it was about $15 million in 2.5 years. So huge startup. And what I realized is that I picked really bad customer service people. So I actually outsourced it to the rest of the customer service team. So if they actually called me, if they were actually interviewing me, my responsibility was to learn their name and then offer them the job.
Mhm.
And my customer service went up by 30% when I got out of the way.
Interesting. And so it's knowing what you don't know and being willing to delegate those things to other people who know it better than you do.
Or can do it better. So I'm
Yes.
I'm only really good at about three things, and I've been blessed from a very young age to be one of the worst dyslexics on record. A lot of the things I couldn't do, I just couldn't physically do, and I was used to doing it. So the reason, no, I don't run my own schedule is, scheduling requires you to send out an email, have a conversation, set up a time, make sure it's in the right time zone, and then get all the information into a calendar so I can get at it. The
Right.
chances of me not getting one of those right is pretty vast.
Right.
I'm a firm believer in being the least intelligent person in the room or the least smart person
Mm,
in the room. So I'm always looking for a new group of people to be around and to learn from. One of the great things that I learned from a gentleman from Strategic Coach, Dan Sullivan, talks about, and if as an entrepreneur, he's one of the best masterminds there is for
mm,
certain types of running of entrepreneurship. And he talked about coming up with a circle of things that you like to do, that you're good at, and that you have to do. And start shifting all the stuff that you good at and have to do onto other people until you're only doing one or two things. And therefore, you can spend a lot more time doing that. It's taken me 13 years to figure out what I should be doing, which is relatively little.
that I don't believe because you were on my team. So I know that you do lots, but I feel like, and you tell me, but you have all of this knowledge of how to scale. Not just scale, but how to scale businesses, yes, because you helped us so much, but also about efficiency and about not wasting resources and time efficiency and sort of decision making efficiency and all of those things helped us so much. And I don't really think honestly that I did one mastermind many years ago, but I don't think I ever had the relationship that you and I have still, but the work relationship. It's very rare that I find anyone who I feel like can actually hold space for me, honestly, not to sound like egotistical, but generally speaking, I feel like, because I'm a big space holder for others, but your level of expertise when it came to the stuff I don't know was so great, but you made it accessible so I could understand. Like just you made it sort of easy, especially the things that I resisted doing, like asking people to do things for me, like all of those things that were sort of I was getting in my own way, as you said before. There's something about trusting that someone else knows. And it's I didn't know you, right? And so it was rolling the dice, but it was so beneficial. And I've certainly, I feel like anyone, if you are writing your first book and you don't have a launch plan, you are already too late. So you need to get moving on coming up with a launch plan because what I learned, and really you strategized with Team TC, the launch plan for the book, that is something that now I know how to do. We know how to do. And it was an arduous process to how do we get the pre-sales? How do we do the things? And these are things that a lot of my friends who've written books never even thought about till way after the fact. And of course, the book didn't do that great. And our book continues to sell very well because I feel like of all of that time and energy that we put in. But I want to switch gears and I wanted to ask you, I'm always curious about people's sort of origin story. So, what in your life brought you to this point of being a brand and business strategist for all of the people that you're doing it for? Like what is it that called you there?
Possibly because it's one of the three things I do well, to be perfectly honest. So when you say origin story, I'll hark back probably farther than you want, but that's fine. I grew up in the Middle East. My father was an archaeologist, and for the first 18 years of my life, we were excavating the Middle East. And that was an interesting endeavor. If you go to Israel now, it's a lovely modern country. And when my parents were first going there, they still resharpened the needles when they gave you an injection. So a vastly different kind of place. And my parents would bring 150, 200 students into really a third world country at the time to do work that you could not pay someone to do in the United States. And they did it as a volunteer and paid their way. So seeing that and understanding how that really worked and recognizing the individuals who, if they have a mission and we're able to work through that is great. I, as a fifth and sixth grader, would have to figure out what I was going to want, use, and need for the entire 10 weeks that I was gone. And it would have to fit into a backpack because my teddy bear was the other thing that I brought with me. Um, so just being able to plan that and then recognizing that once you get there, it will go wrong. It will go wrong at the worst time. and there are consequences for it to go wrong. Now, what I love about being strategic about businesses is that most of the time we're not killing people. You can fix almost anything that goes wrong there, but I've done it enough that I can start seeing around the corners a little bit. And in fact, I don't know if you remember, but you and I had a first conversation, and I asked some obscure and unusual questions because A, it allowed me to evaluate if we would work well together, and
Mhm.
B, it taught me a lot about where you were going. So I would be able to say, okay, I understand this. I've seen this. And one of the things I'm really quite good at is seeing the patterns
Mm.
and where we start seeing patterns and what those patterns actually do. So I can say, oh, if I can ask 4 or 5 questions, I can already see where our patterns is because I've done 20 books, 6 New York Times bestsellers. I've built
Yep.
businesses in multiple places. I know what the mindset is that needs to do it so that I can then break it down to wherever we are at the time. Did that answer your
Right.
question?
It did, and it's really helpful because breaking it down, because here's the thing, helping, building, and strategizing those kind of successful endeavors is amazing. But what makes you special to me is that you're able to break them down to doable actions and tasks for the team and for me too. It wasn't just the team, it was also you helped me a lot with my mindset because you knew it, either I was you sensed it because actually we ended up having one of the conversations we ended up having. You sensed I didn't even tell you that I was sweating something. I must have said something the way that I said it, and you were like, "Hey, do you have a minute? Can you hop on a call?" And then you're like, "What's going on with you and these influencers?" And I was like, "Nothing. It's just stupid. I don't want to ask people to do things." And you were like, "Okay, let's talk about this." And once it all came out, there was a meeting of the minds, but I was also able to sort of pivot towards what I needed to do what was the right thing to do for this project that I had poured like my literally my life into, rather than abandoning it because of my fear, because of my ego, because of my whatever the things were. So I just find that there's so much psychology involved with having a successful business where the people who work for you and the people you work with are clear about what their roles and responsibilities are. And I think that a lot of that, working with you, there was a lot of us cleaning that up in our business as well. So there wasn't so much overlap. We were not duplicating efforts. We were really kind of getting it down to this is the system. And that helped me so much. And again, we were just talking about like having a document with information of like, I was like, I'm going to look at the document about what we're talking about. And they're like, oh yeah, I think that's one of the best practices. And I was like, oh my God, yes. That's when things started being so much easier for me. Again, it wasn't reinventing the wheel every time. I did 220 interviews in the past 2 year and a half. You know what I mean? There was a lot of interviewing happening, and having a tight way of doing it was so super helpful for me. But again, I feel like you really helped, maybe more than you know, or maybe you do know, because it isn't just that the book is successful and that people are still, I mean, all of the stuff that's gone on with the book, which is just beautiful and amazing. And it's really about the stories that people share, the people who email, not just the 5-star reviews, and there's a lot of those as well, but it's people being like, oh my God, this changed my life. Yes, that inspires me. But what really kept me going was this understanding that you and I basically came to together, that my best bet for this book was to be consistent and was to do a grassroots thing. You told me, you said, Terri, there's going to be some dark horses in the people who support your book. You're going to be shocked. Maybe the people you think are going to really support it may not. But there is going to be some who just love it and they're influencers and they're just going to go to town. And I had 2 people like that
Mhm.
who just out of nowhere were like, literally, like, I want to introduce you to every high profile podcast I've ever, your stuff is amazing. It changed my life. And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what Camper said was going to happen. And here it is happening. So you were very predictive in that as well. But what that did for me in the process of the book was it allowed me to be less stressed. That there were going to be things like magical and amazing and expansive and abundant things that were going to happen. And you didn't use any of those words. But what you said instilled that seed where I was like, stop needing to micromanage the crap out of this whole thing. Be consistent, do what you need to do, and be coachable. Let Camper coach you. And you did. And I let you. So, anyway, I just appreciate you so much. Where can people find you? Like, that's what I want to know.
Um, so the easiest part is, I mean, with a name like Camper Bull, it's probably pretty straightforward, especially if you grab the URL easily. So it's camperbull.com is the easiest place to find me. There are multiple other businesses that are around, but at least that's where we're right now. I'd like to give three thoughts about what you shared with me because I think it's kind of very fundamental. The first is all about procedure and process. When you're talking about getting structure in there, one of the mantras I use regularly is that structure and restriction builds freedom. So the more that you can create structures, the more that you can restrict exactly what you're doing, you free yourself up. And by the way, you decrease the stress of the rest of the organization because they're not trying to figure it out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So as you create your processes, as we both got onto this call, what was our first thing we did is we said we have to pull up the document. I would not be at all surprised that it's a very similar document because I
Right.
know for a fact that our teams actually share best practices back and forth. So we
Yep.
both get better at that. And that brings up the other point that you're talking about mindset. I went through some real challenging times in the last couple of months, and it was a great test of the team because the team just took over and was able to take it. But the biggest concern was my mindset changed, and I had to step back and get back into the mindset that I needed to be in. As you hold space, so do I for people. And
Mm-hmm.
if they're concerned about what's going on, I can't do it unless they're doing it right. One of the things I love about being an entrepreneur is it will bring up the thing that you're bad at, and it will emphasize it the most, and it will make you work on it, or it won't work.
Right. It's so true. All right. So was that three? Oh, the third thing was consistency, I think.
Consistency is the final thing. And if there's only one secret to 13 years, multiple businesses, being in the back end of some of the major businesses in the world, being in the quiet corner where people call on a regular basis. It doesn't break down to intelligence. It doesn't break down to knowledge. It doesn't break down to who you know or what you know. It's whether you can do it consistently over time. If
Mm-hmm.
you can do the same thing over and over for 18 and 20 months, in the long run, you always succeed. It may not be
Mm-hmm.
exactly the way you expect it. And I
Right.
mean, like one of the classic things is when I talked to you about Boundary Boss for the first time, I said, will you be willing to promote this for 18 months at a minimum?
Mm-hmm.
And you'd already committed to that.
Yep.
So you'd already made the success. We weren't quite sure how it was going to come out. And
Mm-hmm.
it never came out like planned, but it
Nope.
came out much better, but
Yeah.
differently.
Exactly. Well, I super appreciate you. Thank you so much for the way that you've contributed to my life and my business. You guys, camperbull.com. That's where you can find them. All this information will be in the show notes. Thank you, Camper. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you much. Appreciate the time.